General Borelius, colleagues and friends, Σας ευχαριστώ για την ευκαιρική προσκλική να έρθουμε μαζί σας σήμερα στην όμορφη πόλη της Αθήνας. Είναι η τιμή μας να συναντήσουμε με τους συναδελφούς μας από την Ελληνική Πολεμική Αεροπορία, με την οποία η Βασιλική Πολεμική Αεροπορία έχει απολαύσει μία μακρύ σχέση. I think I just said I'm happy to be here. That's all my Greek. On behalf of the Chief of the Air Staff from London, Air Chief Marshal Sir Mike Wigston, thank you for the invitation to speak here today, because it feels like the world is changing. And this conference comes at a very important time in military affairs. When I joined the Air Force nearly 30 years ago, what was the definition of normal? My commanders at the time had grown up in a world where the threat was defined by the Cold War. Our focus was European defense, including homeland defense, but the direction was changing. And if I look at my flying logbook since then, it tells a story of sustained expeditionary operations in conflicts that involved large iron mountains of equipment, an enemy that was technologically inferior, slow kill chains, and low attrition. This is a point that has been made by Christian Brose, a former Senior Staff Director of the Senate Armed Forces Committee, in his interesting book, Kill Chain, published in 2020. We learned new words like efficiency, and we became used to supply chains that gave us things just in time. But as we focused on this way of fighting, our competitors were busy thinking about the future in a way that demands a different approach now, and a different approach to the one that we have been used to over the past 20 or 30 years. It's a future in which the demands on air power will only increase. Let me start by giving you a short update of what the Royal Air Force is doing. Then I'll talk about some lessons from Ukraine from our perspective, and then outline some priorities for the next generation Air Force. In the UK, the Royal Air Force is currently the most operationally engaged and strategically relevant element of our armed forces. Our operational activities include the following. We have been conducting combat air patrols with our NATO colleagues over Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and we've been delivering combat air operations from our Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers in the North Sea. We're carrying out ISR missions over the international airspace of the Black Sea with our rivet-joined aircraft. We're maintaining a constant air bridge of lethal and non-lethal aid to our Ukrainian friends and ensuring that their armed forces continue to receive essential combat training within the UK before being put into the front line against Russian forces. We have moved well over 10,000 Ukrainians back and forth to the UK for training. RAF aircraft have flown 5,000 anti-tank rounds, 20,000 sets of body armor, and 1.5 million rounds of ammunition to our Ukrainian friends. We continue to support the government of Iraq in conducting kinetic operations against the few remaining elements of Islamic State, and we do this as part of the international coalition, many of whom are here today. Late last year, we deployed to Australia on exercise Pitch Black, a major exercise of 17 nations from across the Indo-Pacific and Europe. And for us, this demonstrated the ability to project air power rapidly and over long distances. And last week, we conducted an evacuation of personnel from Sudan, along with other international colleagues. And we are continuing to conduct space operations with our allies and partners. So when added together, these things remind us of the continuing importance of air power and the global nature of our operations. But what else are we learning? The scale of what is happening in Ukraine is extraordinary. But in the debate about what Ukraine is teaching us, there are many different perspectives. The risk is, and you will know this too, that certain commentators want to learn the lessons that simply suit their own agenda. But I do think that what is happening in Ukraine is, as we have heard from other speakers, demonstrating something very important about air power and its control of the air, of course. The fact that neither side in the conflict has achieved and maintained air superiority when they need it is the fact. And there are many reasons for this, and we have heard those earlier today, to which I would add Russia's inability to integrate our air power across domains, which I think has been a factor. And so the consequence, as other speakers have said, a grinding, attritional ground war that resembles World War I. And so control of the air is what we need. Control of the air where you need it, when you need it is essential. And as warfighting aviators, this is our central and core purpose. But for us, this is where we, in the UK, see one of the most significant changes in the new normal, because in the new normal, we are going to have to be prepared to fight for control of the air. The days in which we can take this for granted are disappearing. And this presents a challenge to us because in conflicts between those who are well-equipped, well-trained, and well-integrated, this will not come for free. As we know, control of the air starts with air domain awareness. For the Royal Air Force, we are prioritizing this. We are purchasing the E-7 Wedgetail, which will provide fifth-generation airborne early warning and control with multi-role electronically scanned array that is interoperable and interchangeable with key allies. Of course, space plays a vital part. Let me say one or two words there. Space is becoming more contested, more competitive, and we've seen how the use of commercial space vehicles has made a difference in Ukraine. For example, the Starlink network, which has provided communications for Ukrainian forces, and how commercial satellite imagery has played a role in countering Russian propaganda. But meanwhile, our concepts have for a long time prioritized projecting our forces into our opponent's space to conduct offensive action. But our opponents, at the same time, have thought carefully about how to make this as difficult and costly as possible. The use of longer range and hypersonic weapons is an example. And so credible capability to suppress, degrade, and defeat elements of these systems is vital. And we also find answers to these challenges in the range and mass that new technology offers. Achieving mass in the new normal feels like it will be very different to how we achieved it in the past. And in the fight for control of the air, control of the electromagnetic spectrum matters too. Russia has spent many years investing heavily in anti-access area denial capabilities. In the new normal, we need to be more proactive in denying and degrading the use of the electromagnetic spectrum for our opponents. And our training should replicate what it is like to operate in disrupted, degraded, and denied environments. And we're seeing that on the modern battlefield, there is nowhere to hide, especially when an enemy has air and space-based ISR and possesses a spectrum of capabilities to strike static targets on the ground, from unmanned aircraft systems, precision and non-guided munitions, cruise and hypersonic missiles. A war of prototypes, fielding new and novel capabilities ahead of your enemy is really important. In the UK, we have understood that this means the speed at which we acquire new capabilities has to match the speed that technology is developing. Yes, some capabilities take years to develop, but in the new normal, it is no use having a procurement process that cannot respond to the speed that new technology appears. The side that can adapt quickest is the side that will win. In the UK, our Rapid Capabilities Office allows rapid technological insertion to get capability into the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. And this speaks to our relationship with industry, which is enormously important. We have spent the last 30 years leaning our processes, reducing our inventories, centralizing, and generally making ourselves more efficient. All of this has been essential, but to be successful in the new normal, we will need to learn new words. Words like agility, words like resilience, resilient supply chains, and the industrial capacity to replenish stockpiles are some examples. Another example is that we have become used to the integration of new capabilities and weapons onto our platforms, taking years. I strongly suspect this will be challenged in the new normal as we seek to stay ahead of our competitors. And on the question of agility, we should feel confident as aviators that we are in a unique position amongst warfighters to operate in an agile way. The dynamic employment of air power has for many years been a great strength that has allowed us to be effective and responsive. But in the new normal, I judge that we will need to embrace agile combat employment, as my French colleague was describing, meaning our operations are not predictable and targetable, but that we operate from unpredictable locations which present our opponents with complicated targeting dilemmas. And we should learn from those who approach agile combat employment already, for example, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And finally, there is the question of our mindset, particularly when it comes to risk. If you want a good book about managing risk, I can recommend Professor Sidney Dekker from Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia, whose work on safety over the past 20 years has, in my opinion, been some of the most insightful of any commentator on the subject. We are all now far safer than we were 50 years ago, when the rate of accidents was much higher than it is today. However, more rules do not necessarily make more safety, especially not if a particular level of safety has already been achieved. Imposing standards from a headquarters undermines and ignores the ability of frontline people to deal with local situations. The management of risk can become an industry in itself. The growth of rules, regulations, and processes has become a feature of the past 25 years. But in the new normal, the need for operational agility will not be achieved unless we change our attitude towards risk. We need to devolve and declutter our processes. People are not a problem to be controlled. People are the solution to our problems. We won't win unless we acknowledge this. Colleagues and friends, I could say more, but for now, I hope this provides some food for thought that we can explore more during questions. I know that a lot of this is not new to you, but I hope it gives you a sense of the things we are thinking about in the UK as we contemplate the challenges for the future. Understanding the threat we face today and in the future is never a precise exercise and easy to get it wrong. But I truly say to you that in my career, I cannot remember a time when the sense of instability around the world has felt more acute. Therefore, a conference like this is very important. We must work together and share ideas. I've very much enjoyed listening to the speakers today and learning from colleagues about how we might do this. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ για την ευκαιρία να μιλήσω οι καλύτερες ευχές μου σε όλους σας. Thank you.